some interesting conversations. I was really thrilled to be able to find someone who is doing this kind of work. I know that in Europe and other places, there's a lot more activity in this kind of thing, and you don't often get a chance to hear about it firsthand in this country. So please give a warm welcome to Mark Macy.
Thanks, Diane, and thank you all for coming. I have a lot of pretty incredible, mind-boggling information to share today, and I can attest to the validity of it. I've become friends, or I was friends with the researchers in Europe who were getting these contacts. A lot of them have already died. They're starting to contact us from the other side even. But, so anyway, I'm glad you came. Well, God was looking down on the earth recently, and things seem to be a little more unruly among the humans. So God assembled a team of angels to go down to earth and do a survey. And they went down and did a quick survey and came back up and said, "That's right, God, we found that things are becoming a little bit more unruly among the humans. We found that 90% of the people are behaving kind of badly, and only 10% are being really good." So God thought for a moment, what can I do to give hope and encouragement to this small 10% of the people who are trying to be good? I know, I'll send them an email. So you know what that email said? I was hoping somebody knew. I didn't get one either. As far back as I can remember, I was always an atheist or an agnostic. Thoughts of God and afterlife seemed like wishful thinking to me. But then in 1988, I was diagnosed with cancer, and with death staring me in the face, suddenly I had to know, what really happens to us after we die. I couldn't take it on faith, not that there's anything wrong with faith, but I've always needed some kind of proof or good solid evidence to convince me of something that was beyond my understanding. And the afterlife was certainly beyond my understanding. So, in the course of healing, in 1991 I went to a conference in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I ran into an old fellow named George Meek. George was the father of ITC, or Instrumental Transcommunication. It's the use of technology to get information from the other side in the form of voices, images, and text through technical equipment, TVs, radios, telephones, computers, and that kind of thing. Well, George had some amazing things to share at the conference. He said his wife, Jeanette, had died the previous year, and shortly after getting settled in on the other side, she sent George a letter through a computer. Now, the letter came through a computer in Europe while George was at home in North Carolina, and had three very personal incidents from their life together. One of them had to do with a box of books that they had shipped to Anne Valentin in California, but the books got lost in shipment, and when they received the box, it was full of Harlequin novels. A second item had to do with a yard light that they had installed in their backyard for a kind of an outrageous sum by a local electrician. And the third item had to do with a house key that they lent to their tenant Debbie, who had lost her key. Now these three incidents they were of no interest to anyone really, not even to George, except that they proved conclusively that Jeanette's mind and memory were still alive, and she had her full faculties without her physical body. And that's what George was trying to do since retiring from industry. He was trying to convince the world, I guess, that there is no death, that we live forever. And it's just a transition from one state to another. He said that Jeanette also sent him a picture from the other side, showing the paradise world that she was living in now. The woman on the left face is Jeanette Meek, and the young woman in the dark dress is their daughter Nancy Carroll, who died at the age of 2 weeks. And when the two of them became reunited on the other side, Nancy Carroll came to her as a baby again, an infant. She was delivered to Jeanette. And meanwhile, Jeanette was growing to the prime of life from an old woman. And the baby quickly grew to the prime of life. And so that everybody in this paradise world lives at the prime of life between age 25 and 35. That was a very healing time for Jeanette, who lost her baby at 2 months, or 2 weeks, I guess, and that had kind of left a hole in her life. So it was a very healing time, which is something we all go through quickly in this paradise world. The man on the right is Hal Roach, the TV and Hollywood producer from the 40s and 50s. They didn't know each other in a lifetime, but they seemed to resonate at the same vibration, so they wound up in the same paradise world.
What is this picture?
Well, this picture was, both the picture and the letter came through a computer in Europe. The researchers would go to work in the morning. There was a couple. They'd turn everything off before they left. Sometimes they'd get home and there would be new files planted on the hard disk of the computer, which was not running. It turned on by invisible hands, I guess, while they were gone. And the files would contain text, like the picture, like the letter I showed, and contain images in the form of JPEG files or TIFF files. And it was a concerted effort by our spirit group to try to give us more information about what life is like on the other side, basically. And I was really impressed by the picture and letter, but I wasn't sure if it was for real. It seemed so mind-boggling to me at the time. But George had some even more compelling evidence. He said that he and another man named Bill O'Neill had developed a device they called Spiricom, short for Spirit Communication. Now, Bill O'Neill would stand in front of the Spiricom device, and he would talk to people on the other side of the veil, the way that you or I might stand in front of a speakerphone and talk to someone on the other side of town or on the other side of the Atlantic. And this is what the Spiricom sounded like.
Almost 4 o'clock in the morning, and the last time we talked was what? At 2:15. I just forget what time it was. What's that, sir? No, that's what you said, sir.
So we carry our personalities across to the other side too. There was a lot of fascinating, actually about 20 hours of dialogues between Bill O'Neill and his spirit friends, mostly with Doc Mueller, over a period of 4 years. And it was captured on tape. So I thought, if this is for real, if he's really getting this kind of contacts from the other side, there must be something to this afterlife. George said that wasn't the end of it either. He said that one day he went down to his basement lab with a 35mm camera and a tripod, and he set up the camera to take pictures, a series of about 200 pictures automatically under special lighting. So George would sit in a chair under this special lighting, and he had an out-of-body experience which he captured on film. You can see the projection of the energy body and its proverbial silver cord. And you can see right through his physical body, which becomes totally transparent. And he said he replicated this on another occasion, and this time his physical body was only partially transparent. You can see through his legs. But again, you can see the projection of the energy body and the proverbial silver cord. So there were a lot of interesting people at that conference in 1991, and they were sharing a lot of interesting things. But it was George Meek's afterlife research that really just about knocked me out of my chair and changed my life. So I started to contact George Meek and kind of made a pest of myself for several months. I'd write to him, I went to visit him a couple times, and we became close friends. And he said, "Mark, what I'm doing is nothing. You should see what researchers in Europe are doing." So we arranged a flight to Europe, and what I saw there really changed my life forever. There was a couple in Luxembourg who invited me into their home, where they had a set of radios tuned between stations. So just a low hiss of white noise filled the room. And we spent the afternoon just drinking water and talking to each other, getting to know each other. And suddenly the sounds of the radio began to fade away as the voice of one of our spirit friends faded in. And he said, "It can only work when the vibrations of those present are in complete harmony and when their aims and intentions are pure." the Spirit went on to address each of us in the room individually by name and give us each a personal message. And this is the one he gave to me. So that was my experience in Luxembourg. In Italy, there was a fellow named Marcello Bacci who'd been using the same radio that he'd been using since the 1950s. It was an old vacuum tube style radio. Now guests would visit him and gather in his basement, and they would talk to their deceased loved ones through Marcello's radio. And he told me that sometimes the spirit friends would not only talk to him as guests, but also sing to them. And this is a German man named Adolf Holmes. Adolf's mother died when he was just a baby, so he had a lifelong yearning to somehow get to know the mother that he'd never known on Earth. And it seemed like an impossible task or an impossible dream until he heard about ITC, and then he became infatuated with the research, and he became immersed in it. He'd get up every morning and begin to experiment with his radios or televisions. And it wasn't long before spirit faces began to flash across his television set, like this picture of his late mother. Now apparently, Elise Carolyn Holmes, after she died on Earth, she'd gone to these finer realms of spirit, and she had no interest whatsoever in the Earth. She'd pretty much forgotten about it, as many people do when they cross over, because life is so much different. It's like a dream you've left behind. But his desire was so intense to have her back working with him, that some ethereal beings, who I'll talk about later, or angels, found her basically and invited her to come and participate in the research with her son from Earth. And she agreed to do that, and she became his chief collaborator after all those years of being away from the Earth. Interesting story. Another face that Adolf received on his television set belonged to Friedrich Jürgensen. Jürgensen was a pioneer in what's called EVP, or electronic voice phenomenon. Back in the 1950s, after World War II, audio taping became popular for the first time. People would take music and nature sounds and conversations, and sometimes they'd play it back and they'd hear these tiny voices on tape, voices that by all rational thought shouldn't be there. So some people began to study and catalog these voices, and they evolved into what's now called EVP, or electronic voice phenomenon. And Friedrich Jürgensen was one of the pioneers in this work. He was out taping bird songs one day, and one message came from his mother. It said, "Friedel, my little Friedel, can you hear me?" Friedel's a nickname for Friedrich. You'd hear other voices too. One voice said, "Bird songs in the night." Because when they look at our world, it seems kind of dark here because of the very dense vibration here on Earth. In any case, Jürgensen became a very well-known pioneer in EVP, often regarded as like the father of EVP. And After he died, he continued the work. He died in 1987, and several years later he sent this picture to Adolf Holmes, and the way it came through was kind of interesting. Adolf Holmes would wake up in a trance-like state some morning. He was a very psychically gifted man. And when he woke up in this trance, that's when he had his best results experimenting. So on this one morning, he brought the color TV out and turned it on, which was unusual. He usually worked with his black and white television. And then he set up the video camera in front of the TV, and as soon as he turned on both units, this picture of Friedrich Jürgensen showed up on Adolf Holmes' television screen. He started talking to the TV, as he always does, hoping that he'd solicit voice contact. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. In this case, there was no voice contact that came through, but there was a loud cracking sound in the next room. So when the voice went away off his television, he turned off the TV and the video camera, and he went next door to the next room. And he found his computer had been turned on by itself, and the printer had been turned on, and now there was a printout in the printer. And it said, "This is Friedel from Sweden." I'm going to try to paraphrase the message if I can, so it was kind of important. He said, "Spread this message as far and wide as you can. We have a difficult time contacting the earth because minds have been closed off to the spiritual. And we need a kind of a new awakening among humans so we can open up bridges." He said, "I sent this picture to you in 1991 of your time, but it arrives today in 1994, and for these 3 years it's been lost in the quantum of timelessness and spacelessness," which is an unusual thing. This is the kind of insights we're getting from ITC, what their world is like. Time is nebulous. It's a kind of an illusion of our world. And so they'll send us something, and it will not arrive in our world until the conditions are right. For example, Adolf Holmes' trance-like state that morning, also the use of the technology, the color TV and the video camera. All those conditions came together and the contact came through. So this is Friedrich Jürgensen in lifetime, and you can see the resemblance. He's an older man in lifetime, and pretty much at the prime of life in the spirit picture. This is one of my favorite ITC contacts of all time. This is an ethereal being, or an angel, and there are 7 of them who've been working with us since 1995, or actually a little bit before that. And they are the ones who make these more enhanced or elaborate forms of ITC communications possible. They say that they've never been in physical bodies, they don't have a gender, and they don't have the skin and the ego that we have on Earth. These things give us the illusion of individuality. So without those illusions, they live together in clusters in the ethereal realm. Very tightly knit groups of angels live together. They come apart once in a while to do individual tasks and functions and projects, but then they always come back together where they feel the most comfortable. And I think, they didn't say this, but I believe this is one of the 7 also, this ethereal-like form in the background. And you can see why people have attributed them with wings. You can kind of see wing-like energy emanations from this ethereal being. But they say that they don't really have wings. It's just a kind of a creative thing that artists conveyed some time ago. And this is also my favorite contact. They left a message on a telephone answering device before our second meeting. I helped establish an international panel of scientists and researchers in 1995. We met in Dartington, England, and forged a constitution and a purpose, which was to pursue ITC contacts in a moral, ethical way. And they said, the ethereal being said, because of that commitment and other factors also, they decided to work with us, with our group. And our second meeting was going to be held in Tarrytown, New York, and this message came on the telephone answering device about a week before our meeting. It's about 3 minutes long, and I'm just going to play a short excerpt of it here so you get the idea of what their voice sounds like when they manufacture a voice that we can understand. It's really an ethereal sounding voice, a little bit male, a little bit female. Just a beautiful voice, I think.
This is the second time that we accompany and guide you in your progress towards a free, wealthy, and sane future in which humanity would have stripped off the chains of intolerance and cruelty. A future in which it will be able to establish a fruitful and durable relationship with the lighter realms of existence.
So that was kind of a key part of the message. They say this is the 7th time that we've accompanied and guide you on your progress. And if we have time today, I'm going to get into that and explain what they're talking about, what those other 6 times were, and why they choose this as the 7th time. So my trip to Europe was pretty expanding for me. I was just amazed by what's going on in our world and other worlds. And so when I got home from Europe, what do you suppose I did? I jumped in a car, and went to Radio Shack. I bought 3 broadband radios, a tape recorder, and a small external mic, and I began to experiment. I'd get up at 3 or 4 in the morning every day, and I'd set up a bowl of fruit and some water for breakfast, and I'd start talking to the radios. Or actually, I'd talk to invisible friends beyond the radios and beyond our world, but still right there beside me. And I'll explain how that works. We all kind of know how that works, but I'll explain it in some detail in just a moment. But it wasn't long in my experiments before I started getting these tiny little EVP voices on tape. They typically last 1 to 2 seconds, and you can't hear them when they're coming through. It's only when you play back the tape that you can hear these little voices. But occasionally I'd get loud, clear voices that would break through the radio sounds, and that's what ITC is about. These are called direct voices. And this is an example of where one of the spirits says, "Time just passes here." Excuse me. Okay, the contacts that I've received through telephone and through the tape recorder also, through the radio sounds, is usually the voice of Konstantin Raudive. Konstantin Raudive was a Latvian psychologist who taught psychology at the University of Uppsala in Sweden. And he was like me in some ways. He was skeptical of all this talk of the afterlife, and especially communication with the afterlife, until he went to visit Jurgensen back in the early 1970s, or late 1960s, and he was amazed at these little voices on tape. So he became fully immersed in the work too, and by the time he died in 1974, he had gathered over 70,000 of the voices on tape. Many of them under very strict laboratory conditions. He had scientists sitting in on the experiments, and very tightly controlled experiments, and the voices would come through his radio sounds all the time. And again, when he died, he decided to continue the work from the other side, to resume the work. So, talk about job security. And this research you never have to retire, you know, just keep doing it if you like it. He's the fellow who called me on the phone a number of times, and sometimes he would give me technical advice for my equipment. Sometimes we would just talk philosophically. And that's what was happening in this phone call. It lasted almost 15 minutes, and this is about a 2 or 3 minute excerpt from that telephone conversation.
It's not easy on Earth to develop social systems that are based on non-hierarchical.
They try to find it from because these are systems implanted in your world, and you will have to do with them.
Yeah.
So it's very important. You assume the role, and then it will be done because it's only for the common cause.
Okay. What we're trying to establish with the net, I think, is more of a network on Earth, which is, as opposed to a hierarchical or bureaucratic type organization, a network without a formal structure. I think that can be done maybe with the internet.
That is right, because you are one. essential main point of this network. You are one big dot on that, you understand?
Thank you.
And from this big dot, there are diverges for other dots, smaller dots, and it's only from this big dot that ramifications may be made.
So what he was telling us, our group, was that they monitor us on a computer-like screen on their side of the veil. They have a lot of super high-tech equipment that we can't even imagine here yet. And they see us all as points on an image, all the members of INIT, or International for Instrumental Transcommunication. There were lines connecting us, representing heart connections, I believe, and there were several members who had formed the group who were kind of considered to be the key members, and only those people could branch out to bring new members into the group.
What was the means that you recorded this?
Okay, this actually came through a telephone. The phone rang just as it normally would, and I picked it up, and it's him, my spirit friend. And by then, the first time he called, I didn't have caller ID, I didn't have recording equipment or anything. It just startled me, and I was really talked for, actually I didn't even talk, I just listened to him talk for about 5 seconds, and communication broke off. After that, I bought recorders for every house in the phone, every phone in the house. So whenever I get a spirit phone call, I just press the record button right away.
And what does caller ID say?
Out of area, the caller ID says.
Kind of understatement, huh?
Yeah, it is mind-blowing. And the reason we know this was not a fake call is because in America, we cannot have our phones traced automatically by the phone company, because the law requires that it has to be some kind of a life-threatening situation or something like that, and then law enforcement will get involved and trace the phone calls. But in Europe, you can arrange with Deutsche Telekom or one of the other communications companies and have all your calls traced. So my friend and actually friends in Luxembourg and Germany would have their phones traced for a period of 3 months. They'd get phone calls from spirit friends because these were dedicated lines they had put into their home. Unlisted numbers, nobody, not even their colleagues, knew the numbers. So they get these spirit phone calls, and at the end of the 3 months, Deutsche Telekom would come back and say, we report to you that there have been no phone calls coming through this line in the last 3 months. So it verifies what we tend to believe about the spirit worlds, is they're all right here around us, interposed with our world. And so they don't have to contact us through the public phone networks. They actually come into our home, they come into our labs, they set up their equipment and impinge their energies directly onto our equipment. And that's how they make these contacts happen. So this is still real mind-boggling to most people. And what's needed today is a kind of a simple technique that allows fairly compelling contacts to happen on a regular basis in a mixed crowd. And that's where the illuminator comes in. That's the box in my lab that I now have in Diane's house. And basically it has 2 fans in it, one on the top, one on the bottom. And in the middle there's a plexiglass barrel that has liquid-filled rings along the side of the barrel. And the liquid has been programmed, it's a water-based liquid, it's been programmed the way that we program crystal, with intention and love and emotions, you know. And so when the fans blow, they're counter-rotating fans, so they create a vortex of energy within, like a little tornado inside the plexiglass barrel. And somehow between the liquid-filled rings and the vortex, it creates this very powerful field of subtle energy. People who are sensitive can often feel a kind of a bristling or tingling sensation when they're in the presence of the luminaire. We don't know much about how it's created other than what I just said. But I do know that, and my colleagues know also, that if we're in the field, the illuminator, and somebody else is there, and we take a picture of them with a Polaroid camera, very often we get the most amazing spirit faces on film. Just like this picture. This is a friend of ours named Mimi, who lives in California. She used to live in New Jersey. On the left, you can see the way she actually looks. And on the right, you can see an older woman kind of superimposed on the lower part of her face. And that's her mother. And Debbie Alberti lives in Pennsylvania. Her husband John died of a massive heart attack during a tennis game. And she wrote to me. We had a mutual friend named Steve Martin, Dr. Steve Martin. He's a psychologist in New York. And he told the couple about me before John had died, so they were aware of my work a little bit. So after John died, Debbie was really going through a tough grieving time, and she contacted me and said she needs some kind of proof, even though she knows there's an afterlife. She just needed something tangible to hold on to. So that summer, I gave a workshop at the Edgar Cayce Center in New York City, the ARE Center in New York City. Debbie showed up, and we took a series of pictures of Debbie, and most of them came out fairly clear, like this one. But in one of them, her husband John was superimposed very clearly over her throat. And as we looked at more closely, we realized it was actually two faces divided diagonally down the middle. And that she recognized very clearly as her husband John from Lifetime. You can see the resemblance when he was clean shaven. And the other picture, it took me several weeks to figure out, but I'm pretty sure it's a picture of it's the face of Edgar Cayce. Not enough face there to be sure, and we have as it leaves the earth. Most of us, after we die, we shed the physical body and we awaken in this paradise world. All it takes is basically decent living, basic happiness of the way things with life and treating other people in a decent manner. And that creates a fine vibration within us that takes us to this beautiful paradise world. A few people are kind of steeped with a lot of resentment or negativity through their life, and if they die before they reconcile that, sometimes they wind up in this kind of dismal, gray, dark place for a while. It's not the eternal hell of brimstone and fire that we hear about from fundamentalist Christianity. It's basically just a troubled place where there are a lot of confused souls. And there are always people from these finer realms of existence who make constant trips down in here on mission work. They wait for people to go through their patterns of negative thinking, and then they bring them up to this paradise world to be resuscitated and kind of healed in these huge hospital-like buildings. They have actually buildings. In the paradise world, they have everything we have on earth and a lot more. Some people, they have recreation centers where you can do incredible things. And people say they love the paradise world so much they never want to leave. But there's always a little voice inside that says, no, you got to go back to earth for another lifetime. Or they can work with an ascended master to raise their vibration, purify their thoughts and their attitudes, and rise to these finer levels of spirit beyond form and structure. And when you get to those places, thousands of years on earth can pass by in a snap of a finger. It's just amazing. Our spirit friends, most of our spirit group, are currently residing in this astral realm, and they use their equipment to contact us, but they can't do that without the facilitating abilities of these ethereal beings, these angels that I shared a little information with earlier. They're the ones who have the knowledge and the power to bridge the dimensions and make these miraculous contacts happen. And when people from this realm visit these finer realms of existence, they say that being among the ethereal beings is like standing before a bank of living supercomputers that exchange oceans of information instantly. They say that they can go into these, like a reverie, a state of total bliss and meditate. And years and years could go by on Earth, but they sometimes have to be shaken back by our desire to work with them. We think about them, and so they're kind of shaken under a very, and they come back down to the paradise world so they can continue working with us. And it's not something that traps them to the earth. It's something they've chosen to do on the other side for the sake of our world, which is, it's a very difficult world. There are a lot of, if we have time, I'll talk about that too. But are there any other questions or comments about this?
Yeah, you mentioned there's a paradise world And is that this equivalent to the astral realm?
Some people break up the astral realm into the lower astral, the middle astral, and the higher astral. And the dismal realm is what I call the lower astral. And the middle and the higher astral planes are what I'm referring to as the paradise world. It's really a nice existence. It's a lot like the earth, but much, much nicer.
So let's say it again. The middle, repeat what you just said.
Oh,
The higher astral.
the higher astral realm is it's also been called the fifth level by Friedrich Myers.
Is that the paradise?
That's really the subtlest and finest part of the paradise world. The middle astral is also kind of like a paradise. It's much like the earth, not quite as much of a paradise as the higher astral. But I just lump those two together into the astral realm. Are there any other comments or questions about anything I've talked about so far?
Were you given instructions to make the illumination? Were you given instructions from some place that enabled you to make the illuminator?
No, all I got was permission from my wife because I had to buy one. It cost a lot of money. So there was a fellow in Michigan, Battle Creek, Michigan, who named Patrick Richards, who develops the illuminators. And I think there's only 8 or 9 of them, 9 of them in the world right now.
And all used for the same purpose?
No, they're almost all used for healing purposes. Everybody who owns one's an energy healer. And this creates kind of a healing field. People say they feel better, that it tends to lessen symptoms of illnesses and things. But also it's used as kind of a, I can't think of the name of the word, where it's like a pendulum where you test yes or no on something. But if you take a picture of a person, when they use it in their research, if the person comes out clear, it's coherent, so that the medicine they're holding in their hand is good for them. But if it's a negative medicine, something that's harmful, it'll come out incoherent. Sometimes they'll see spirit faces. But that's their intention with the illuminator. My intention has always been to invite my spirit team to come in and help show spirit guides and loved ones. And so my way works too, but I'm the only one who uses mine full-time for ITC.
How did you know it was an illuminator you needed and not some other kind of device? Or can you tinker with it and make it more effective?
And how does it work also?
Okay. All I know is it creates a field. And that's the field is what allows them to manifest. The spirit comes in close and they seem to absorb some of our ectoplasmic substance, become dense enough to show up on the film. What was your question?
How do you know that this was the right machine for you for this?
I went to the ICENE conference, the International Society for the Study of Subtle Energy Medicine, in Boulder one year, and I ran into Jack Stuckey, who owns one of these devices, and I saw a Polaroid picture of a white woman with a black man superimposed over her face, very clearly. Or no, it was a black woman and a white woman. And he showed me some of the other pictures too, very clearly, different faces. And sometimes we'd see pictures of loved ones, like a father smiling, and so I knew right away that these were spirit faces. And while none of the researchers using the illuminator at the time acknowledged that, I knew that's what it was, so I just bought one for that purpose.
Is this information that you have about the astral body information that came through one of your communication devices?
Actually, I received most of my information from George Meek. He had studied some of these esoteric societies, like the Masons, and different esoteric groups, and he had consolidated a lot of that information into a nice model from the celestial and cosmic planes all the way down to the lower astral planes and the physical plane. And talked about the different bodies we have, the physical body, the astral body, and the ethereal body that are all inside of us. And our spirit group more or less verified that it was more or less legitimate. They said it's a simplification. There's no way to describe these worlds in a way that would be accurate in human terms, because we don't have the understanding of the vocabulary to describe what's really happening. They said it's fairly accurate.
I was wondering, I know that I've experienced for years when my husband died. At a certain time, the phone would ring, in a peculiar way. I wasn't supposed to be heard. That's okay, I wasn't supposed to be heard. At a certain time of the day, usually early in the morning, the phone would ring, but it wasn't a normal vibration ring that you get with a phone. And a friend of mine, after her loved one died, the lights would flicker. And somebody else I know has a relative of mine going to play pranks on them with sound equipment. Can you explain anything about that ability? How does it happen? Why are they earthbound doing this?
That's a complicated. Did everybody hear what she was asking?
No. Okay.
She said that after her husband died, a lot of anomalies, electronic anomalies, began to happen in her house. Flashing lights, telephone calls with nobody on them, and different things like that. And she was wondering how that sort of thing happens. And what seems to be the case is, like I said, all the worlds of spirit are superimposed over our own, and these people move in and out of our lives constantly, especially loved ones who left the earth recently. They spend a lot of time at home with their loved ones, just sharing moments, before they move on. And there's every physical thing in our world has a template, like a spiritual template in a subtler realm. So when we have a light switch on the wall, there's also a light switch in subtler realms, and they can actually go up to the light switch and start moving it. And if there's enough emotional connection, I think, or something like that, they can actually change not only their template, but also change things in our world. That's not exactly how it happens, but that's kind of how it seems to happen from their world. Does that kind of make sense? Does that answer your question?
I believe so, but I'm not that technically inclined, so I was just interested in what you thought. Thank you. I think.
Yeah, that's my take on it.
Thank you.
Do clocks stopping have anything to do with this? Is that part of this?
What was that?
Clocks stopping.
Clocks?
Or is that not necessarily?
Yeah, I think all sorts of electronic equipment can be affected by them, and even in the car, they can affect the radio. We've had contacts from my colleagues coming through radios while they're driving in the car. They'll just take over a radio station, basically. And since this handheld mic is no longer working, I'm going to go ahead and just finish the rest of my presentation, then we can maybe have questions and answers near the end. So, the way I see this multidimensional omniverse, at the center of everything is what they call the source, or God, or Yahweh, or Allah, or Brahman. It's like this perfect source of love and consciousness, which manifests as this pure, non-vibrating light. And as the light leaves the source, it begins to vibrate very fast. And as further out it goes, it vibrates slower and slower. And it manifests as everything in all the various dimensions of existence. And we humans are out on the very far reaches of this, kind of like out in the trenches. And the way I've kind of come to look at this vast existence is that the source is trying to spread its light and its wisdom and its love as far as it possibly can into the deepest reaches of dimensions. And it seems to have reached a point here where it's not easy to maintain it. The light becomes kind of dim out here where it's slow moving and dense. And so there's pockets of chaos that begin to develop, a lot of negativity and darkness. And so what we do, I think, on Earth, what we do when we're planning to come to Earth is we take an assignment to we all have the same basic purpose of an existence here on earth, which is to be born, and as we grow up, learn to get in touch with our highest self, with our conscious self. And by doing that, the highest self, or the soul, is a part of the source, and so we can pull in all of this love and wisdom directly from the source, let it move through us, and we can kind of spray it out into this world through our thoughts and our words and our actions. And I think that's why we accept a job, a lifetime here on earth. And then beyond that, we also have personal missions that we have to achieve based on our skills, our talents, and things that we have come to earth to do maybe from past lifetimes. Our spirit friends tell us that there's something they call a contact field that spans many dimensions, and it's formed by the thoughts and the attitudes of all the researchers on earth working together on a project, and also our spirit group. All of our thoughts and attitudes from both sides form this pool of consciousness that spans dimensions. And if we're all in harmony, if everyone's driven by love and trust and goodwill, then the contact field becomes clear. It's just abstract to us, but to them it's very real on the other side. They can see into our world then, and they can work with our equipment. But if there's negative thinking or dissonance in the form of fear and envy and greed and that kind of thing, then the contact field becomes cloudy, and it becomes really difficult then for them to see into our world and to work with our equipment. Excuse me. So the key to ITC research is not the equipment that we're using, it's basically the attitude, the resonance that people can sustain over a period of time. And our group broke down in 1999 or 2000 because egos began to take over, as they do in human groups. The couple in Luxembourg were getting such good contacts that one or two researchers began to question the legitimacy of the contacts. I know they were real. I knew then, and I know now that they were very real, but there were still people who were getting skeptical, and that skepticism caused the contact field to grow kind of cloudy. And then the people in Luxembourg naturally became very angry when their honesty was called into question, so they became hostile, and things just kind of grew out of control. That's the way things work in human groups, you know. And so it's very difficult to sustain these ITC contacts, and that's why the future has to depend not on the equipment, but on our ability to learn how to sustain harmony in a group. Now I'd like to talk for a moment about my own personal afterlife experiences, but I'm going to put it into a broader context. There are many types of journeys beyond our world. The most basic that we all have is dreaming. Every night we go to bed, we fall asleep, and we have dreams. Most of these dreams are just excursions into these different worlds of spirit. And when we wake up, we forget about the dream very quickly, typically. A near-death experience, of course, is when the body dies and we have an extended dream, a more lucid dream than usual, very, very lucid. We actually go to the other side. I don't know if you've seen The Ghost Whisperer, but it's written by James Van Prague, a well-known psychic, and his ability is he can see people who are kind of stuck, but after they are redeemed, they can go into this light. And that's what he can see, is just the light. Other psychics can go beyond the light and see, they can talk to ethereal beings, but the light is basically, I believe, that the light is the light from this paradise world where people are supposed to be. Is just, when you first get there, it's a blinding light almost. It's so beautiful, but it's a blinding light. It's so powerful. And then you get adjusted and it seems normal. And then your other life here on earth begins to fade into a dream as you get settled in on the other side. And whenever you move among dimensions, the place you left always fades away into a dream. And you have to, if you want to, you can keep the dream alive with your thoughts and your love for people who you've left behind. But some people forget about the dream altogether and just move on. We're told that when atheists and skeptics die, sometimes, well, they usually wake up in this paradise world too if they've been decent, you know. It's not just for spiritually minded. But they no longer believe in life on Earth. They think it was just a bad dream. So their skepticism continues.
At least they're consistent.
What's that?
At least they're
They're
consistent.
consistent. So NDEs are basically, you cross over to the other side and then you come back and you have these wonderful, loving experiences. And NDEs you've heard from other people here in this group and elsewhere, it gives you just a small taste of the intense love that you feel. OBEs, of course, are very similar, except the body doesn't die. It just goes into a deep sleep, and you have, then you can still travel to other places. You probably don't wind up for a long extent in this paradise world, but you can go there for a while. In OBEs, you can also travel to the Earth and other places on Earth, and lucid dreams, of course, are like an OBE again, like a near-death experience again, except the body doesn't die. And sometimes people with lucid dreams can actually wind up in this dark and dismal place for a while too, and then they come back and it's kind of scary. But it's easy to resolve. You just kind of think loving thoughts, and your next dream is probably going to be a really nice one. And meditation, of course, is a technique of keeping the body awake, or let the body go to sleep, but keeping the mind awake. And then you can go to these different levels, meditative levels, to basically commune with beings at finer and finer realms of existence. And binaural beats, that's basically like a hemisync technology of Monroe Institute. You put on headphones, or sometimes an eye mask with red lights, and the sounds and the lights, or both, or just one or the other, they pulsate so that the stimulating of the eye or the ear takes you down into finer levels of meditation, so that you can learn to do in minutes or hours what mystics sometimes takes years to learn how to achieve these finer states of consciousness. And my own journey didn't really begin until I had cancer. And when I was on the operating table, it seemed like, I didn't remember this right away, but looking back, I had gone to this place, it was like a high-tech lab, and I remember there were a group of us, kind of a line, people waiting to get around this table, and I put my hands on the table, and they kind of got stuck there. It was like they were glued to the table. And on the middle of the table was a device that had a couple of lines coming into it that were like glass. They were transparent. You could see this rainbow-colored light streaming to and from the device. And when my hand got stuck, I thought, whoa, these are not just normal energies. And everybody kind of looked at me like, duh. You know, like I was there. I kind of felt out of place, and everybody knew I was out of place, but there was nothing, I think everybody else there was kind of living there. They were inhabitants of this high-tech paradise lab in the world that it was part of. And I was just kind of visiting, I guess, getting an idea. There was another dream I had shortly after, while I was still recovering. And again, I was in this high-tech building. It was like, I was a technical writer for most of my career, and it was like one of these big buildings. I was walking down a hallway, and everybody I saw just felt very much at peace. Everybody was really feeling good. So I knew I wasn't on Earth. And they again, I felt out of place, and they recognized me as kind of a visitor, but I felt welcome, but I still felt out of place. My first really near-death experience was just when I felt, I was in this beautiful place, and I just felt this total love. And when I came back, I remember I could see the love within people. It was like everybody was this perfect love. And then there was a little bit of a kind of a viscous shell or membrane, I guess, of fear that was around them. But the love was so powerful. It seemed like it would easily be able to wash away all that fear that was in this little shell that people had. And when I got back from these meetings on the other side, I kind of woke up knowing that I had these habits in this lifetime that I had to contend with. That seemed to be my biggest obstacle to getting done what I had to do while alive, just overcoming these habits. And occasionally I'll meditate. This started happening about 6 years after my surgery, after I started getting involved in ITC. I'd be meditating or dozing or sleeping, usually kind of dozing or daydreaming, and these stuck souls would be right in front of me. I could see them. And I would just kind of see my guides off to the side, and I'd bring them in close, or I'd somehow shine a light, not a light, so to speak, but I made it so I was kind of like an intercessor between these guides out here and the stuck soul, and I could actually see the soul being accompanied by the guides up to this finer level of existence. So this began to happen spontaneously to me on a number of occasions. I guess it's called redemption work or rescue work or something like that. But I know I've talked to a lot of other people who have similar experiences. There are a lot of us on Earth needed right now to do that kind of work. There are so many people stuck in this dismal realm, and it's so much easier for the finer guides in spirit to help these people if we on Earth can participate through prayer and awareness of the plight, because we can provide some kind of light or enlightenment on the situation so that the guides, a lot of times these guys who come from higher levels down to the dismal realm to do their rescue work, they find these people who are stuck in patterns and they don't even recognize that there's anybody around them. They're just kind of stuck. But if we can participate with some kind of prayer or meditation, focused meditation, we can kind of wake them up out of their dream, and they'll kind of look around and they'll see these guides around them, and then they can be rescued. So it sometimes helps for us to help out in that way. So there are a lot of people on Earth who are doing that, but there are a lot more who could be used doing it also. This is the CD I produced with the Monroe Institute. It has the hemisync sounds, which kind of bring you into a meditative state. It takes you on a heart meditation first, which is like the seat of the soul. So from the heart, you can get in touch with the source, and you can bring all this love in, and we connect with loved ones, and we can connect with the source, and then spray that light out into the world, and bring convert the room we're in into a temple of light, just by bringing all this love through us from the source. And then we take a kind of a journey to the paradise worlds, where most of us awaken after we die, and we kind of see what that's like. And one of the purposes of the CD, in fact, is to get us acclimated to going to this paradise world, so that after we die, we just go there automatically. It's just an automatic thing. Now, typically I would do a 5-minute meditation, but I don't think we have time if I'm going to cover this other information. And so let's move on to... I'm going to show you now a series of pictures we've gotten from the other side to show a glimpse of this paradise world. The fellow on the left is Alexander Piget in his lifetime, and on the right, this is a picture that he sent from the other side. He said that he was visiting the snowland of this paradise. There's also a summer land, but this snowland had a lot of reindeer, and along with this, he sent a letter to his mother, a little note to his mother. The fellow on the left and the young woman on the right, all three of these people had died in their 30s, I guess, or 40s, and they became good friends after they crossed over. This one I showed you, this is Jeanette Meek and her daughter Nancy Carroll. And this is a friend of the researchers who had died as an old woman, and now she's at the prime of life, and she's kind of coming out of this what they call the river of eternity. Ezra Brown, up in the top left, he died as a young, an adolescent, I guess, about 11 or 13, about 13 years old, I think. He had leukemia. His mother was Chinese, his father was German. And when he crossed over, his parents got involved in this EVP work. They started experimenting with a tape recorder. And they got a little voice that said, "I have long hair." And after chemo, he lost all his hair. So now on the other side, he had beautiful long hair. And then it wasn't long after that that he sent a picture of himself through the computer in Luxembourg. And the horses had belonged to the researcher in Luxembourg named Maggie. King was one of her horses who had died. So sometimes our spirit group got creative and sent several pictures to different people. This is a friend of the researchers named Ernst Max, whose wife Margaret had died a couple years earlier. After he died, he sent this picture of himself working at a computer terminal. In the background is what they call the river of eternity. It's this huge river that flows through this paradise world. You walk up to the river, you scoop up a handful of this. It's a little thicker than water, and you take a drink, and you're totally revitalized. If you drop the water, your hand is totally dry. It's not like water on Earth. It's more of an energizing, revitalizing fluid that people can just drink to get recharged. But you don't have to do that. You can, just by breathing the air in this paradise world, you're constantly revitalized. You have a body exactly like the physical body, cell by cell. It's an exact replication, but it's at the prime of life. And if you get injured in the astral body, it quickly heals, it never gets sick. It's just a perfect existence. It's just incredible. And he sent a letter along with this picture saying that he and Margaret now enjoy their young bodies along the banks of the river of eternity. So, just amazing. And this is a young couple, again, known by the researchers who were now enjoying their life on the other side. This is a girl named Anne Guignet, a French girl who died in 1922 at age 11. And she said that since she crossed over, she's become kind of in charge of a project to reduce suffering and pain among children on Earth, newborn life. Not unborn life, but newborn life. She made that point clear. And this is a picture that they sent of Anne Guignet now as a young woman on the other side. It came through a computer in Luxembourg at about the same time that this picture came through a television in Germany. And we sometimes get these cross contacts like this to help give us assurance that these are legitimate contacts. Something like this couldn't be hoaxed by somebody on Earth. You know, these contacts are so amazing that our natural reaction would be, it's got to be a hoax. Somebody planted this picture on the computer. Somebody just created this picture on TV. But since they came through at the same time in different locations, we know that it was either a concerted effort against these two colleagues who didn't particularly like each other, or it was our spirit group choreographing these cross contacts. This is Romy Schneider in the middle, and a friend of hers is a young African prince. And they're kind of enjoying a picture of the Earth, their former home. This is Paracelsus, the father of holistic medicine. And this is the way he looks now in his young spirit body in a Swiss-like alpine setting. This is a guy named Yang Fuzi, who was a healer for the Emperor of China around the 2nd century BC, I think, or the 2nd century AD, I can't remember exactly. His job was to go around the countryside and examine psychics who were affecting the people, you know, to determine whether they were in touch with these finer levels of spirit that could provide healing to the people, or if they were just in touch with troubled spirits who were stirring up more troubles here on Earth. And that was his job, to kind of screen the different mediums who were at work in China back then. And this is also a picture of the same man that came through a television set in Germany. And this is an African named Wele Mabanga who was eaten by a lion. He was killed by an African lion. And he became a good friend of Richard Francis Burton, the English writer, an adventurer. He was an explorer who traveled the world, and now that he's on the other side, Richard Francis Burton goes out exploring the spirit world, trying to find out what's out there, and then he reports back to us sometimes what he's found. And Boyle Mabanga has become his good friend and a scout for his journeys. This is one of the 7 ethereal beings, we were told. He's kind of an advanced nature spirit, not like a typical nature spirit here on Earth, but someone who's very close to nature in many worlds. This is the home of Klaus Schreiber, a researcher in Germany, one of the pioneers in TV ITC. And after he died, he said he lived in this beautiful forest home. And this is the temple that Jules Verne awakened in after he died. This is a researcher named Hannah Buschbeck, a German researcher who died as an old woman, came through a couple years later and is just glowing and radiant about being on the other side. It's a paradise world. And this is a 19th century chemist named Henry Sinclair DeVille, who made aluminum useful in industry among many other accomplishments during his lifetime. He was a famous scientist back then. And he's one of the people in science who have joined the spirit group on the other side to contact us. And this is a radio contact that was sent by Henry Sinclair DeVille also.
My name is Henry Sinclair DeVille. I left the world in 1881, and I'm speaking to you in my name and in the name of our staff, from Lifeline, the scientists. Our project, as well as from Lifeline, as from Townsville, is to set fire to minds. To set fire to minds in your world, and in that moment, to try to master time.
So I think I'll open the session up to questions and answers and discussion now. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to? Yes, you have to speak up if you can.
Is English the universal language that the spirits world talks to?
Okay, good question. Okay, she asked if English is the universal language over there, and they actually, almost all of the contacts came through in German or Luxembourgish or French. Sometimes they would speak Swedish or whatever language. Like you said, they were trying to address somebody, they would speak in their language. And these ethereal beings especially could speak in any language imaginable. They could speak in Swahili if they wanted to. Our spirit friends in the astral realm usually just spoke in the languages they were accustomed to on Earth. Raudive spoke a little bit of English, but he spoke a lot of German and Swedish and Latvian. So that's Konstantin Raudive, the guy who called in on the phone. So he usually spoke in German, but when he was talking to me, I'm linguistically challenged, as most Americans are, so they always have to speak to me in English.
Do they have an accent?
Do they have an accent? Yeah, if they had an accent on Earth, they seemed to carry that over when they came back down in level to work with us. It seems like a lot of patterns that we have on Earth, as we ascend to finer levels, we lose those patterns. But as we come back down toward the physical realm, those patterns come back, and they become a part of our spirit. Yeah?
And one of the first things you showed is a spirit was speaking to you and said something about the dangers of drugs. Was that in reference, do you think, to narcotic drugs or prescription drugs, or what do you know about that?
Yeah, I did some experimenting with drugs. I grew up through the 60s and 70s, and I was in the Navy in Vietnam in the like 73 and 74. There was a lot of drug use going on. And I think that they were talking about mostly people who do a lot of drugs habitually and addictively. It could be prescription, it could be recreational, whatever. The trouble is your body, the dopamine that we have in our brain, it creates these patterns of behavior that we become accustomed to here on Earth. And if we carry those patterns to the other side, it can be kind of frustrating because we don't have the same drugs and the same hormones in their mind to facilitate these patterns, but especially with drugs and alcohol, which kind of blow the dopamine out completely and just hijack the whole dopamine reward system, you know. But there's no drugs on the other side to satisfy those patterns that are, or those cravings that we have, so it becomes a frustrating existence for a while. And sometimes people, because of that craving, they become dense in their spirit, come close to the earth and get in with addicts and alcoholics here on earth, and so they can continue to enjoy the buzz. So they resist going to this paradise world because the addictions hold them back. So he was basically telling us it's good to overcome those patterns before we leave the earth, if we can. Otherwise, we have to go through this extended recuperation period and rehabilitation period on the other side. Same as withdrawals here, I guess.
Do they give advice about future events? I'm thinking like 2012.
What's it?
Do they give advice on future events? Or do they ever talk about the future?
Do they talk about the future? They say that the future is kind of nebulous to them. It's what they call fields of possibilities,
Okay.
based on what we do on Earth. In fact, this is well, I'll tell you a couple things they told us. The head of this time stream laboratory on the other side said that the hardest thing she had to contend with once she died was one of the hardest things was to observe time as a bodily substance. It took me a while to figure out what she was talking about, you know. There is no time over there. Everything kind of unfolds simultaneously. But when they observe us on Earth, they see bodily changes going on, and that's how they know that time is in existence. They also said that there are many parallel worlds with our world, many parallel universes, physical universes, so that there are certain key points in the history on Earth where different fields of possibility break off into other areas. There's one world where Hitler was, he actually took over the world. There's other ones where he was very quickly defeated. And so Hitler was one of these points, I guess, where things branched out into different, and there are different things throughout history that have caused many different parallel universes to exist. And they exist now.
Is there a study that could prove or disprove whether the different lives a person has led or think they have led? Is there a way to prove anything?
You know, I can't think of any good solid evidence for reincarnation and multiple lives. Although I know it happens, I've heard it from so many sources. I don't know of any good solid evidence of that other than psychic messages that might come through 2 or 3 different mediums who say the same thing or talk about the same life of a person. But even that could be just an attached entity that they're, you know, so there's no really good solid scientific evidence that I know of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Why do these spirit faces are superimposed on a living person? Why won't they stand next to them, or, you know, why you have to kind of look at the face and see the other face? Have you figured that out?
Yeah, I think all I can figure is that I think that they need the substance we have, and they absorb that into their body, and they become solid enough. If they're out here, I guess it's harder to absorb it.
Okay.
What were the 7 times that the angels tried to communicate? You mentioned that you would say something about that.
What was that?
I said that one ethereal being mentioned this is the 7th time.
Oh, yes,
tried to
yes.
communicate.
Okay, I have a bunch of slides. That was the next thing I was going to do. There's not really time, but I'll just go through it real quickly without the slides. They said that they have come close to our world on 6 different occasions since Atlantis. The civilization of Atlantis, actually, the last island fell around 1220 BC, which seems a lot more recent than most of us would believe. But that's what they told us. The King's Island was near, it was named Basileia, and it was near the island of Helgoland off the coast of Germany and Denmark. And so since then, there have been 6 times when they've come close to our world, apparently. The first one there's a temple called Sophis, which is located the same place where Babylon emerged centuries later. And so I think Babylon was the second one, and they didn't tell us the third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth ones, but I think the sixth was probably the Hebrews, the Jews. I think they were that chosen race the sixth time, and I think they're here now for the seventh time, and I've been wondering who are they going to, and the purpose of it, they come to the earth at times when humanity has reached kind of a crossroads, when we could either ascend to achieve lasting relationship with these ethereal beings so they can just have light streaming into our world, or we can plunge into another dark period. And I think that's what we've done all 6 times because we're human. We get to this point and then we just kind of plunge into our egos and personalities, which boil off into wars, and different things. And so they're here for the 7th time. I think they have a lot more hope this time because they're not choosing one civilization. I think the 7th people is going to be all of mankind because we have the technology to allow that to happen. We can communicate with anyone in the world, and I think they're going to give us some help in overcoming our innate obstacles, what I was talking about, the dopamine things. Science is now finding that dopamine is triggered in the brain. Well, they know it's triggered in the brain to give us a flush of ecstasy, basically. And it happens at times, typically when we've done things that perpetuate our survival, like sex for mating or eating for food, for sustenance. They're now finding that it's also triggered by violence, by aggressive behavior, because that's what we needed at one time to protect what we had, protect ourselves from aggressive animals and stuff and other people. So they're finding that this dopamine is part of our brain that's basically, it gives us rewards for kind of foul behavior, boozing and brawling and gluttony and everything that, all of our bad habits, a lot of times are the result of these dopamine pathways we have in the brain. So if we can learn to control those, which we've learned to do through meditation and prayer and different methods like that, but if we can also use maybe brain implants to learn to stimulate us when we do altruistic kind of behavior, that's what I think these ethereal beings are looking. They want us to come up with solutions so we can become more aligned with them. And then they can help convert this world to a paradise, which is the project that they've been talking about to us. It's converting our world to a project. They said there used to be a planet between Mars and Jupiter called Marduk, or Eden. This is really getting back to the beginning of the project and also to everything that you just asked. And this Eden was inhabited by superhumans, and it was a paradise world. And their technology got out of hand and blew their planet up. Became the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. It became comets. It became all sorts of things that basically shrapnel from this explosion. And it pummeled the moon and the planets. That's where all the craters came from. But before they destroyed their planet, they colonized the Earth. And over time, after the destruction of Marduk, or Eden, they crossbred with primitive hominids on Earth. And in order to come up with a human that would be wise and brilliant enough to make a paradise of our world, but also tough and rugged enough and mean enough to survive in this very difficult ecosystem. And modern humans are kind of the best thing they came up with. They've tried Neanderthals and Australopithecus and giants and dwarves, all kinds of different people over the centuries and millennia. But we're the ones they seem to have some faith in, if we can just overcome the egos and the hormones. So I think that's all I have time for. Thank you all for coming, and
we're so lucky to have you here. This is totally yeah, looks like is it working again? No, it's not. I still have. Is Linda Merity here? Linda, are you here? You are. Speak now, because I have 2 places left for a session with Mark on Monday. One is at 4:30, and one is at 3 o'clock. So if you're interested in either one of those sessions, see me after the lecture now. We are going to Ruby's, and you can continue, and if you're having a private session, you can, talk to him some more at that time and get more information. Next month is John Terrell. John, are you here still? John in the back will be our speaker next month, and I'm sure you will enjoy it very much. And it's our 10th anniversary next month. So please join us for that great occasion. Also, take your trash and have a good time.